Okay, well, welcome to today's webinar titled Predictive Modeling and Fundraising. This webinar is a sequel to one we had last month called Predictive Modeling 101 for Business People, and in that one we covered more of the techniques of modeling, how do you actually build a model, and we talked a lot about creating a culture of analytics. So if you haven't seen that one already, that'll go into some more of the specific model building. This one is called Predictive Modeling and Fundraising. And we're going to look at use cases and how have fundraising teams use this and what have some of the benefits been. And I'm Doug Cogswell. I'm the president and CEO of Advisor Solutions. And my experience is basically in business intelligence and data analytics. And I'm here with Kristen Markham from Texas A&M. Hi, Kristen.
Hello.
And she's fairly new to data analytics, which I think is one of the key points we're trying to get across is this is not hard to do. And in-house teams can come up to speed and get great value out of this kind of techniques. And I've also got Sandy Yandel, who's the director of the annual fund at Northern Illinois, and she's got experience in prospect research and then has, a year or two ago, picked up the annual fund. Hi, Sandy.
Hi.
So they'll be prime contributors today as we sort of talk about how this gets used. I'm just going to do a quick refresher of what we covered last time, then we get into the types of models used in fundraising, what are some of the benefits, who builds them, who uses them. People that build them may not be the same people who use them. There's two different groups, and how does this actually work in practice? So the concept is this modeling is using math and stats to examine and determine patterns in a set of data, which could be the characteristics of my large donors. It could be the characteristics of lapsed donors who are reacquired, or it could be the characteristics of different messages that work with different groups of people, and you're trying to predict behavior in another set of data. For example, who else has the same characteristics as my large donors? Because I'd like to get a ranked list of them and maybe prioritize them for follow-up. And this integrates really well with these in-memory technologies where you can slice and dice data rapidly, and data visualization where you can visually explore, and the map kind of complements that. Advisor does a lot of work in this area, and some lessons we kind of went into more detail in the prior webinar. There's a lot of good data out there, and most people have enough to do this. The second point, we really feel strongly it's better to get something simple going now than to create an overly complex model later. And we've seen teams really try to build the perfect model. Often consultants get involved from the outside, and that's all good, but you're then missing using the data to make decisions now. And so we're big on most teams have enough to get going with, get up and get going. Don't need to be a stats expert. The new tools and techniques, somebody who's got an inquisitive mind and a feel for causality can do this, and we usually recommend 2 or 3 people work together and vet hypotheses and discuss. A lot of this is the math will tell you, give you indicators, influences, but vetting them as a team helps call out what really matters and what's just maybe mathematically coincidental but not really causal. The key to all of that is knowing the business, the operation, and the forces and influence behind it, because the math is just indicating a direction. It's indicating a probability. The reality is it needs to make logical sense, and there needs to be causality, and the human mind working together with the math can help untangle all of that. And in our view, internal staff can turn out great models quicker than outside consultants if they know the business better. And we're going to keep moving through this up front, but Sandy or Kristen, anything you'd like to add to this list?
I suppose I really stand by all the things that you just said. I have not a very strong background in math, but I really believe in using data and predictive modeling to make good decisions, and I think that our ability to do it in-house and work as a team and look at our data and analyze it together, not only through building a model, but on the fly, is key to our success as an annual fund. And so all those things that are on the slide and you just said really ring true here at NIU.
I know you've been able to use this to help rally the team as well, because it's I think I'll use some words here, but it's more understandable and it can be better explained. It's not some scores that come in a report, but it's something you actually can participate in and wrap your head around. Did I say that right?
No, I completely agree, because then it becomes something that everyone is working on, and we can all bring our areas of expertise together to say, well, this is coming up high, but it really doesn't actually matter, and the people on the data side can tell us how frequent it is in our database, if it actually is going to have relevance, if it stopped being recorded. We can bring the giving side to them and tell, there are just so many different pieces that can be brought together by doing it with your team in-house and not just letting it be a score that somebody gives you. I can tell you we did, before we had Advisor, get 2 screenings done, and they weren't bad at all, and they've proved helpful as part of predictive modeling through Advisor, but it is so much easier to understand and explain to people the different elements that have gone into it and how we came to the conclusions we did using the predictive modeling feature in Advisor than these outside scores. People still get confused looking back, and I just haven't run into that same problem with Advisor and the modeling.
And Kristen, I know you're a little newer to this, Sandy, but you've come up to speed pretty quick and gotten some early on results by doing it in-house as well.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you guys said, and just we know doing it in-house helps us because we know our constituents better than a consultant. We know what variables might be corollary, where some people might think they're causal, but they're really more corollary because they're already donors. So that's why they participate in certain things and not bring those into the model. And so I think it's a benefit, very much so, to have in-house and to be able to explain and fully understand.
Yeah, in a little bit, we're going to we'll take a look at an example of how the modeling scores can actually be framed in a way so internal teams can really understand them, which sort of really gets this dialogue going. We, and one of our things we like to say is 8 out of 10 is better than 2 out of 2. So we sometimes hear, yeah, if you let a team go with this, they're going to make some decisions wrong. They maybe aren't stats experts, and we could build a better model, or we could prep the data better. And so that, if they make 10 decisions, and we'd say, yeah, if you make 10 decisions, you might get a couple of them not quite right. So, but at least you made 8 out of 10 correctly with the data, which is better than if you do these perfect models and everything's, there's one person who's an expert doing this. You only get to make 2 decisions with data. You probably get them both right. But which is better? We'd argue it's much better to get 8 decisions made with data, pretty quickly than only 2. And the fact of the matter is decisions are paced, and they're going to get made one way or the other. And if there's no data, there's no pattern understanding behind it. It gets made out of intuition or however it gets made, but it's not made on data. In fundraising, there are a variety of models our clients have used, others have used, and they generally fall into categories like this. And I'll let Sandy and Kristen fill in other points, but a major giving, one classic model is to find large donor targets. Who are the most likely to give more money? Donors to specific interest areas or campaign asks. Obviously there's a bunch of, in your data, indicators of interest, degrees. A medical degree, they're probably more aligned towards healthcare and medical things. Events they come to, I'll give you clues to that. Articles they click through in the newsletter. So in addition to capacity and wealth and attachment and all that stuff, there's actually interest areas that is inherent in parts of your data that you can use to help determine interest area for giving. Attachment scores, target ask levels, unit department campaign goals, because obviously if you know giving potential, you've got some feel for attachment, you can create like an expected value for each of your prospects, and then if you have interest areas, you can sum those and get a kind of a quantitative feel for what's really reasonable in campaign. And obviously prioritization within departments. And annual giving, it's a huge another area where the math and the data can really help. Non-donor targets. Not all non-donors are as likely to become donors as others. And you can find the characteristics of the ones that have, and then you can score the rest of the population to find the like groups and focus messaging and content on them, and maybe even get more revenue with less appeals. Reacquisition targets is kind of the same thing. Not everybody who lapses is the same, and I think Sandy has some good points in this just in a minute. Call center alignment. We've done work where if you take different people, student callers, outside callers, and different types of alumni in different interest areas, there's alignments there that work really well, and there's alignments that don't, and this math and the data can help you untangle it. Same thing with volunteer assignments. Messaging segments for appeals, trying to call out interest areas, likelihoods in those areas, and then aligning the messaging with those is really good for getting higher yield. And then expected revenue out of, just like up here with the attachment, interest, wealth, you can sort of sum up how much you might get in different campaign areas. Here, the same thing for different appeal thrusts. Planned giving is another area, and we've done a bunch of work, seen a bunch of work done in using data and models to help allocate resources appropriately. So there's a lot more, but there's a wide range of areas where predictive modeling can be used in fundraising. Kristen, Sandy, jump in on this one.
I can go ahead and start from the major giving point. We've done two models. One was a prioritization model for a specific department only to determine kind of what prospects would be best for, and that we use that for a new development officer to build their prospect list. And then we also have done, or the biggest model that we use the most is who's most likely to be a major, become a major gift giver. And so we used people that were first-time major gift donors in the last 5 years and looked at their characteristics to determine people in our database that were like that to make them. And then what we did is we'll put them out in lists and have them rated as high, medium, or low for our development officers to go visit and call on.
And how did you get the development officers and the team to buy into that? Like, did you do some specific communication approaches? Was it intuitive to them?
Well,
sometimes field officers don't always jump at like lists that are provided to them from prospect research or other parts of the team.
Well, actually, we did have a consultant do our first model, and those lists were very fruitful, and really our development officers had never been given something, I guess, that tangible to just go and call. It was more like, here are the former students that graduated from your department or your college, call and visit them without any structure, I guess, on who would be, more likely to give. I mean, they would have capacity and wealth on it, but nothing that would tell them the likelihood. And so with our first set of lists that the consultant did, they were very successful. So they were ready and anxious and continually asked for updated and new lists since then. So I guess success helps create buy-in from that. So anyway.
And Sandy, I know you've done a bunch of pretty cool things on the annual giving side.
Yeah, I guess I would start by saying when I first started in the annual fund, I just had it in my mind that we had to look at everything we were doing and make sure that we were making decisions based on the data, because otherwise we're just kind of doing what we always had done or just guessing at why things were successful. And so we've done a lot in the last 2.5 years. One thing that I talk about pretty frequently whenever Doug asked me to speak about our direct mail, we completely changed the way that we send out mail, and we have sent much fewer pieces to a more targeted groups and made more money from them because we've taken the time to look at the data, look at who's responding, and then take those characteristics and kind of apply them to a broader pool. Anytime that we send out any piece of mail, whether or not it's something that we want to do or something that someone else wants to do, I always tell them, you have to let me look at the data. You need to let me see If we can narrow it down to the people that are most likely to return the piece, and then we can decide exactly what those people look like and what the message should be. We also, in the telefund, most often do our non-donor acquisition. We have 220,000 living alumni, maybe closer to 230,000 now. We cannot solicit all of them, and so we need to break it down to who are we going to spend our time on. And so we for the last 2 years have had predicted non-donors, and they have done significantly better than in the past. The average gift was over $15 than the previous year when we first did it. And so just by narrowing down that pool and figuring out who is most likely to be a donor at the annual fund level has really improved our non-donor acquisition. And then they become first-time LIBUNs, and we noticed that our first-time LIBUN renewal rate was also higher. So it's much more expensive to acquire a donor than retain them. So if we can get the good donors in the door the first time around and then keep them, then in the long run it'll be better for us. So those are just two of the ways that we are using Advisor in this way.
I know both of you have had proven benefits already by leveraging the data and combinations, just exploring it, but also modeling against it. Sandy, I know you were just talking about the annual giving. What kind of benefits have you seen?
Benefits to doing the modeling?
Yeah, just out of the data, because I know you've had situations where you actually have cut back sends and ended up with more revenue coming in, which almost sounds like magic.
Yeah, it does kind of sound like magic, but it is true. Everything that we have done for the past 2 years, we have it's been very targeted, and our mailings in the fall, our holiday card, and in the spring, we've sent to fewer people each time for each individual piece and made more money from it. I can't find my piece of paper with my exact statistics, but I know that we made from FY13 to FY14, both years that I was fully in the annual fund, we still made almost $30,000 more on our holiday card, and we sent to 500 less people. And from FY12 to FY13, it was an even greater increase. And so even though we've made great gains, there's always something to be learned. There's always more data to look into. And knowing this, like when I want to ask for more money for something, or if we want to do a new project, I can go back to these statistics and say, hey, like look what we've done with the money that we've spent. We've spent it wisely. We've obviously sent it to the right people. And so they know that going into a new project that they have more faith in what we're doing. And then benefits for something like a telefund, we know that even though the non-donor rate of answering the phone or getting them to make a gift is less, that when we get someone on the phone, the conversation is probably going to be better, and we are going to have a higher likelihood of keeping them, and so that's a great benefit to us. There's not just somebody who's going to be like, oh, I'll just give you my $25 and get off the phone. And so it helps us now and in the future. Hopefully, as we continue to build this really good base of new donors, we can have an even more solid program in the future. And plus, it helps us get to know our alumni and friend population better. We can continually look at who is giving to us for the first time or again and again, and then continue to make good decisions based on all the things
this
we're
sort
finding
of
out.
really builds on, or is a great example of, and the prequel to this, we talked about building cultures of analytics, and it's like usually there's a few people at the beginning who get data and want to use it, and then there may be resistance. Senior management may not always be on board, but you kind of like solved point problems, got proven benefits, people saw the benefits, you got some more leeway, did some more, got some more benefits, and over it's been like a couple of years or whatever, you've been building what we would call a culture of analytics, so people are realizing that the data can really help the team to make better use of their resources and effectively raise more money and sometimes even less cost, which is like really cool.
And I would completely agree. Even this morning at a meeting, we were talking about how to effectively get a message out, and I went right back to the same things that we've been talking about. let's look at who these people are, how we can best communicate with them, and then apply those things to the greater pool. Like, we will probably run some sort of model just to, and it's not an annual giving project, but people know that it's an option and that it works. And so there was no pushback or, well, I don't know if that'll work. It was an easy conversation, and whether or not it happens, it's up to them. But like, people understand that here now and really do believe in it. When we first got Advisor, my boss was sold on it. She liked the idea, but now she even knows, like, she'll stand up and tell anybody that we need it because it has truly changed the way we do things. So.
And Kristen, on your side, you're a little earlier into this, but early on results, benefits from the analytics modeling efforts.
Some, specific thing, like it says close large donors faster. I mean, it has definitely helped us identify people, and we have, our development officers have come back from a first visit with, a check in their hand and, a gift agreement to be mailed out later, so from that aspect, there's small known benefits that we see immediately. One of the next things we want to do is really dig into the data and see, not only is our proposals, are we having a higher close rate and things like that, and haven't been able to look at those on an individual level, but at a mass level, I mean, our fundraising, we had our record year, our first year utilizing this information, and each year we've continued to do better. So we definitely are seeing results with gifts coming in the door. So.
Yeah, and just at the bottom too, there's great points, and in the major giving and annual giving, but this whole idea of justifying resource ads. I mean, if you can monetize your prospect pool because you can identify the ones likely to give and put a number on it, which is usually a combination of some capacity and attachment, which is a combination of activities and participation and engagements from a variety of areas. We've had teams use this to justify staff ads, because if you've got a pool of prospects that can add, a few $1 million a year in revenue, well, it certainly makes sense to add a development officer, go bring that in. So in addition to finding the donors and the appeals and all of that, you can use this to really help, strengthen and get the team to the level it needs to be to hit what is the potential that's in your pool. Talk to me a minute, Kristen, Sandy, about you're building these models, and what did it take? I mean, how hard was this? All of that. And the next page talks about end users and kind of pushes out to a larger team. But here we're focused on the skills to actually build and create a model, because I think there's a lot of people kind of sometimes just even freak out about what it takes to do one of these. So any feedback here would be appreciated.
I think that, I guess that skills and experience are, they're not a lot of experience needed, and I wouldn't say a lot of skills are needed. For me, my first user group I went to was a year ago, and I learned so much information there, and came back and really took that and utilized that information to help build the model. And then with my our research team here was kind of, which there's 4 of them, kind of helped bounce around and make sure the path was correct. But I think that this is something anyone can do. If you have I think like you said on the first slide, a curiosity about the data and a nagging sense to want to get an answer and find out more, then you can do this. So.
Yeah, Sandy, what's your perspective?
And I would totally agree. In building the model or doing any data analytics, it's not so much about understanding the math or the statistics behind it. It's understanding the data. And so bringing anyone to the table that could help strengthen the collective understanding of the data is a good thing. When we first created, like we said at the beginning, I started in prospect research, and so the first model that we ever built was on major gifts. And a lot of the information that we took into account transferred over nicely to the annual fund. But we had people from advancement services who knew all the biographic data and the gift data, just what was there. We had people from our programmers who knew exactly how to find the data, where it was located, and like all the back-end stuff. And then anyone else from research who we felt had something to bring to the table. It's supposed to be a conversation about how we can harness all this collective knowledge and put it to use, and then get something out of the database. And so the skills and expertise part, like everybody brought their individual skill sets to the table to come up with something that was meaningful to actually use.
Yeah, great. And I'm going to swing now just on keys to usage, and I'm going to share a few just observations and then run through a quick example of how this gets used and then come back into dialogue discussion. But we think as a firm you need to keep these things simple and frame the scores in street language. We're going to look at an attachment scoring model in a minute where the output is framed as owners highly engaged, and detached and disconnected, because everybody gets that. They don't get a score of 1802, but they get this is a highly engaged prospect. And allow also, though, the users to see what makes up the scores, because if somebody is detached, you need to know why they're detached. Are they detached because they haven't been coming to reunions, or they haven't been giving, or they've never been on a committee? There's a variety of things that would cause them to be detached, and that's then the cultivation steps. If they've been coming to reunions, but they haven't been giving and haven't ever been on a key committee, and they're high capacity, well, that would be a key next step is to get them on a committee and get them giving regularly, and let's get that score up and keep it simple. So here's an example. I'm just going to click on this and open, we call this a project that's coming up in a web browser. And the first page is going to have some capacity and attachment scores. This is some help language over here, but these are attachment scores. They could be wealth screening. They could be research rated, but there's the red, the ones are the 50 million or more, the top capacity prospects, 166 of them, and then this thing runs down to a 9 is a $25,000 to $50,000 prospect. And what we've done with the modeling, what I was talking about a minute ago, there are 584 owners in this population of 55,000 people. There's 6,300 highly engaged, about the same engaged. There's detached and disconnected. So at this level, if you're pushing this out to a team, they can actually use the model, because I might want to say, do I have any high capacity, highly engaged owners who aren't staffed? Well, I could grab maybe the 500,000 and up capacity. Grab the group that's also highly engaged owners. There's 1,527 of them. Get rid of everybody else. I can now go to the staffing page and sort of see out of that group. Here's a group that isn't staffed. There's looks like about 280 of them. Megan Bulford's got about 120. Dan Law's got a bunch. He's got the bright red, which are the high rates. I can grab the unstaffed. Here's my 269 unstaffed, high-rated, highly engaged. I might look at a map of where they are. They're sort of scattered around. Somebody's going to the Bay Area. And here's my list of group in the Bay Area in a list form. So now I quickly use those attachment scores. It's very intuitive. I was looking for highly engaged owners who are also high capacity who aren't staffed. Here's a list of them. And now is where the details are. So the predictive model is creating like this 1476 score and this 1903 score. And if it's done right, it updates every night off the data. But I can see what's going on. And this guy's an owner. He's given the most predictive thing is volunteer committees. He hasn't been on any of those. That would be a next step. He's been giving each of the last 5 years to 5 years back into all the reunions, played some sports, and I can sort of scan over what's going on. These are all highly engaged owners, and so they're all going to have a lot of stuff in here. If I went to the detached, these would be mostly zeros. But at this level, this is a group I might want to get together for a dinner in the Bay Area because they all live there. And I probably want to say the next best step for all of this group is to get them on some committees, get them engaged in some substantive effort with my school, and we'll move forward. But, if you go back to the beginning, if you had thrown those scores out, most people's eyes would have glassed over, and it's hard to have the discussion. But when you frame it in concepts like this, it really works with the ability to get to the scores. And just to, if you want to take a look at the disconnected, you're kind of going to come over here. It's the low scores from the model. And yeah, these guys have been on committees, but they've not been giving, never been to a reunion. They kind of haven't done much. And here's the people that basically graduated and left. So that's the concept. floor back to you, Sandy and Kristen, to add anything else, to your experience of trying to get the team working with these things.
I just would agree to keep things simple and put it in a language that they can understand versus a score which they might question. They might find a way to doubt a score if they see someone. They'll compare two donors, and rather than having them both as highly engaged, if you had a score where one was scored higher than the other, it might put doubt in their minds too, so in your development officer's mind. So I think that is very helpful.
And also, what else is also helpful is you can see what went into the scoring, what factors were the most predictive, and what weight they carried, and being able to go back to that and saying, well, this was a part of it, but this wasn't a high indicator, and so having that to go back to when explanation is needed is also helpful.
Yeah. Great. As we move into the Q&A period, because we're right at the half-hour point here, at the bottom of the webinar panel on the right, there's a place where you can type in questions or chat comments, preferably questions. We'll pick them off and go through answering them. But as we close out the formal part of this, Sandy, Kristen, just talk a little bit. I mean, you talked about kind of what worked, but what was hard, what was unexpected? What did you have to overcome to get this stuff working? Don't everybody go at once. Sorry.
I guess we kind of jumped into everything all together, and I think once you really get a handle on it, that there isn't a really, really difficult part about it. You just have to get used to using Advisor, and once you take your knowledge of that and figuring out how to use the technology, and you add that to your knowledge of the data, it is just as intuitive. And taking the time to create a model that is solid but not perfect, and moving on if it doesn't work well. You might get stuck up just because you want it to be perfect, or have it give you all the answers, or get to certain levels. You just need to kind of trust your gut that the work that you've put into it is good. And at least for me, our annual fund culture is that it's always moving and changing, and we don't have time to spend 2 weeks developing the perfect model. And so, it starts working. It works better when the more you use it, and the more you get in tune with what data points mean something for you, so you can do it in a day or two, and then use it and then move on.
This is, at the end of the day, it's predictive modeling, so the perfect model actually is never perfect. A good model, if it explains 80 or 85%, the quick model might explain 70%. How much better is that model that took all that? It's a little bit better, but it's all in degrees. And I think your points are right. Nobody's got the, ultimately you're back to that 8 out of 10 is better than 2 out of 2 situation.
Yeah, and when you were saying that earlier, I just think you're completely right. Just because you've got 2 out of your 2 decisions you made with data correct, all those other decisions have passed you by, and they've either continued the same way they have always been, or somebody's guessed. Because you don't just get to not make decisions because you don't have time to analyze your data. And so even if you screw up every once in a while, you've probably made some changes or done something right a good majority of the time, and not advocating for screwing up or doing things without thinking, but doing as much as you can with what you have is, to me, a positive thing.
Yeah, we call that the concept of mucking around. You literally are. You're trying to just ad hoc explore in this sandbox and muck around and just sort of see what actually makes sense. And it may take a few models, a few tries, and instead inferring out the collaborative discussion process that makes it really happen. Hey, Kristen, how about you jump in? What was challenging for you? What happened that was unexpected?
I guess for me and for us, it was probably, the variables and the characteristics that we thought might be predictive of behavior weren't necessarily the ones that were predictive, if that makes sense. So really getting into the data and learning more about what created and predicted a major gift donor versus what identified someone as being I guess, liking Texas A&M per se. So I can love Texas A&M, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to give to Texas A&M. So that was something interesting and telling for us to learn about. So really testing your variables and determining what really were causal to giving versus correlate.
Right, and yeah, at the end of the day, you just said it, your most highly ranked prospect may not give anything. It's just they are more likely to than the lower ranked prospect, but it doesn't mean that they will. And it's sort of,
right.
That's why it's probability, not deterministic.
Right.
So we've got some questions that come in, some good ones. So here's one. Does the accuracy of the model not impact the buy-in from the development team? And I'll let you both take a stab at that one.
I guess I don't necessarily have a development team to answer that to, but I guess I don't need to show that at this point. I guess I'm the end of the line, so if I see it and it looks okay, and as long as nobody comes back with questions later, I don't have an answer to that. So Kristen, you're probably better.
Yeah, ours, I would say the same. I don't know. I mean, our development team doesn't see. Their accuracy is when they get their list of prospects that we're saying are highly rated, and they go visit them, and they're getting results from those visits. That creates the buy-in for them, not the accuracy of the model. And for us, we've been, I guess, lucky because our senior, leadership does buy into it and puts an emphasis on our development team visiting the people on these top prospect lists that are coming from the models. So,
yeah, I would agree. It's more like a results focused. So if we notice that something's not coming back right, or we're not getting anybody picking up the phone or whatever, then I go back and say, what happened? What went wrong? Like, is it a problem with the model? Or something else happened? So,
right.
That'd be how we do it too.
I think that's pretty consistent with what we see across a lot of our clients. It's the results, it's the stories. It's like when you were sharing earlier, Sandy, when you actually cut back some of the sends but got more money in, people take notice of that and go, it doesn't matter if the model was 80% or 70%. You did something with data and it worked.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody cares as long as you're making money.
Yeah. Here's a question of annual giving. Our annual giving program is charged with bringing in more donors and not necessarily dollars. Can you give me an example of how you would use advisor to get? We're charged with bringing in more donors and not necessarily dollars. How would you use this to get the donor count up?
Well, that's we're doing exactly the same thing right now. We are pretty good at getting people to upgrade and the top of the pyramid taken care of, but we need people, physical bodies, giving us money that haven't before. And so, like I said before, we used it to figure out what a donor looked like and applied it to the greater pool to see who was most likely to be a donor that has not given before, and then created telefund pools with that. And then right now I'm literally finishing up a project where we are taking that and scaling it down even more to send out a mailing, because while we will call tens of thousands of people, we're not going to do that kind of big of a mailing, but we're going to do the same thing within a non-donor mailing. And so it really doesn't matter how much they're capable of giving. It's just if they're capable of giving at all. And so you don't have to choose the top of the pyramid. It's just a donor at all. It just changes the base population, really. I don't know if I answered that enough. I really, that's what we use it the most for, is really segmenting out the non-donor pool and looking at them to see who we should target, because there are so many and we need them. We can't continue to grow without getting more non-donors.
Yep.
To give.
We've got a couple of technical questions. Let me just try to answer them, and we'll come back to the more kind of fundraising ones. Please explain, causal versus coincidental versus non-dependent factors. You guys can add in. So causal is for example, a large donor. A causal factor would be their wealth. would be their attachment, which could be how many events, or there's a subcomponents to that perhaps. Because those things, the more wealth and the more attached you are, it drives you to be a bigger giver, so they're causally related. A coincidental factor could be just something that happens to match, which makes no logical sense. Like, I don't know, I mean, if ID number came out high, for example, obviously ID number is not a characteristic of the person. It's not assigned in any way that would attach to capacity or something. So it happened to be mathematically related. You know, there's actually some example I remember in stats that, you know, the American League wins the World Series, so a Republican wins the presidency. There's no causality. It could be mathematically correlated, and a model could show those as related. But the human mind would say, no way, that doesn't make any sense. And so you just take that out as an explanatory factor. And then dependent versus independent. You know, if you're picking large donors, you want to get the giving amounts out, because obviously if you put large giving in, it's going to be large givers or large givers. That's not a particularly useful model, because the explanatory factor on giving size is completely related, and the output, large donors, is dependent on large giving. So when you set the model up, you need to think through whether the fact is causal. Yeah, that's key. If it comes out high but it's not causal, it's just coincidental like ID number was, you know, take it out and rerun the model, because it's not determining the outcome. And if it's the same, basically the same thing, the same influence, because it's what you selected on, take that out, because that's not useful to know either. Did I say that well?
I think so.
Okay. Here's another question. Is the model set for the entire year? As people start to give, are they recategorized? How do you handle that? I'll let you guys jump in on that one.
For us, it is set for the entire year, and we don't, I guess we wouldn't, we will recategorize at the end of the year, and some of that's because our development officers are evaluated on penetration of these top prospect lists. So if we changed it throughout the year, it would be hard to measure on that. So, but if they do give, it would be taken into consideration in the next year.
Yep. Sandy, how do you handle that?
I guess it depends on what you're doing. Like, I will run like the huge non-donor model like once or twice a year. Like, I'm not going to redo it all the time, because we handle the actual like asks after someone's giving, and the stewardship, like that all happens in its own separate process. And once they've given, they wouldn't be like re-brought into it. And I exclude people who've made gifts based on whatever project we're doing. But if for these little projects in the mailings, like everything is done in the week or two before it, and so it will be completely like reset, if you will. I won't use data from July to create a holiday card list like that. We try to do it, like, we give ourselves like 2 weeks to get the data scrubbed and ready to go for the mailing. We just use Advisor earlier in the year to kind of make some decisions, and then we'll actually do it right before the project starts. So it depends, but I think the whole point is that it's not meant to be static if you don't want it to be. You can rerun your model as often as you want, or as few times as you want, and create as many or as few as you need, instead of just hiring a consultant to do one model and then hoping it works for several years or whatever.
So there's another question about data size. Is there a minimum size of the prospect pool and or past donor pool that is necessary to begin? We have 800 donors in the pool with like 20,000 alumni. Let me hit that first and let you guys in. Statistically, the idea is you select a target and you compare it to a base population. And the target, you know, any statistics would say it needs to be at least 25 members, and if it needs to have non-systematic risk. So it needs to be kind of a random group. It can't be, if it's 25 members all cross-cut like one way. And you pick large donors, but if you then pick large donors who all live in Greenwich, Connecticut, that's a biased population of large donors. So it'll be large donors that are randomly distributed across the other fields, with not a defined skew. Ideally, you want more, but that would 25 would be the minimum. So you pick a target with 100, 200, 50, 5,000. That's fine. Then you need to compare it some ratio to a base population. Ideally, you don't want the target to be less than like 0.5% or 0.3% of the base population. So if you have 100 people in your target, you'd like your base population to be, if you take 0.5%, that would be 20, 30,000 would be fine. You wouldn't want to compare that to a population of 600,000. So in that case, if that was your target, large donors, and you had this big base population, you just want to think about, let's take out organizations because they don't behave like alumni. Maybe take out parents because they don't behave like alumni, can't have the same characteristics. I'm down to alumni. Well, I've still got 150,000 alumni. Well, let's take out the unrated alumni when I train the model because they're unlikely to be large donors. So now I've got a ratio of maybe I've got 20,000 rated alumni, and I've got 100 of these large donors. That'll work. And then you build the model, and they might then want to score against all alumni because maybe some of the unrated alumni have the same characteristics as these high donors. They just weren't rated for some reason. That's how you kind of do that thing. So yeah, if you have 800, the question was 800 donors, that's fine. That's statistically valid sample to run a model against. If you guys want to add into that, I'll pause for a second.
No, I think that, yeah, I've never ran into an issue in that regard. So.
And the modeling, our tool throws out some coefficients, so it'll tell you if the model looks like doesn't think it did a good job as well. Does your modeling change depending on what stage of your campaign you're in?
I mean, I would say kind of. It more is for me like project-based, who the audience is, whether what model we're using or how we're using it. Non-donors are totally different than the people that we're mailing our holiday card to, so they're totally separate.
Yeah, Kristen, any perspective on doing different things at different phases of a campaign?
I would say, with like what Sandy said, I mean, I think that you would have a different model depending on what you're looking for or whom you're trying to acquire. So if you're, we aren't using this for our annual fund, but for major gift donors, looking for $1 million donor, I think would be a different model and different characteristics than a $25,000 donor. So, so yes, I think that depending on what your target or what your focus is, your model will change, or you'll have a different model.
A couple of specific software questions. Is there a way to pull reports from the system? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I did that quick demo, the lists, there was some tabular views. They can all be exported out. I was on a web version. They drop off the web server down to your desktop and pop them in Excel or whatever you want to do with them from there. And the charts can all come out, so you can easily create PowerPoints or Word docs. And Sandy, I know you've distributed information out of our tools. What have you used to distribute information to the team?
I mean, that's one of the great things about Advisors. You can just take it straight out of what I just got, and either take the chart and give it straight to them, put it in a PowerPoint, bring it up in a meeting. I've done all of the above.
Yeah, and actually, just this is a tutorial. We're not trying to, just push our software, but what we're doing is we're grabbing the data from the source system, usually daily. So I know Sandy used Millennium, I think Kristen used Advance, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're loading out of the SQL Server, the Oracle database, 20, 40, 80, 100 tables, whatever. We can sync in stuff that's in Excel. Sometimes, goals might be there, or there might be survey data that's not in the main database. So we're loading that stuff usually daily. We can load more often, load on demand, but usually daily. And then, what you saw in that quick run through are just graphical representations of the data. The last sheet, when I got to the 26 people, was a list off an entity table with some of the scores put into it. So it's basically, we're a front end of the data systems where you can visually explore it, model it, create these scores. The scores can get saved, so they upload every day and get reset based on, in that case, if you put somebody on one of those volunteer committees, and they came to a reunion over the weekend. On Monday, they might score up from detached to engaged. So it's it's dynamic. It's changed based on the data that you guys are keeping in the databases. So, and then once it's in our app, you can easily export it out in a variety of ways. Somebody asked a question about language. We're English, but we're pulling all the data from the source system. So we're global. We have customers. French, I think, was the question, but it doesn't really matter. We can use Asian characters, Greek characters, Russian characters, English, Arabic characters, whatever. The charts and all the labels and all the text that you see on the screen are from the data. The help stuff is right now in English and Japanese, if that was a specific question. How does the tool, one more question, so we're reaching the end of our time. Any more questions, keep them coming. There's a question, how does the tool inform the message to motivate giving? I think we talked about that. Anything else, Kristen or Sandy, you'd like to add to that? How does it motivate giving? And maybe take it beyond just the modeling. I mean, we talked a minute ago about reports and charts. You use, what do you put in front of the team to get them excited that this is a good list to go with or whatever?
I guess I would just add that it's a way for us to rally around the information and really have faith in the decisions we've made. And we've done a lot of really big things over the last couple of years, but we always can go back and say, we did this for specific reasons, and now let's really latch onto it and move forward, and there's no turning back kind of thing. It's helped us change our messaging, change our segmenting, and we can all stand behind those things. And even though we don't all use Advisor in the same ways, we all kind of understand what it means and what it can do for us, and that kind of motivates us to do as best we can with all the things that we do. I guess I'm not entirely sure how else to answer that.
Kristen, jump in then and finish it.
Well, I agree with everything that Sandy said, and I would also say, when it's more than just one person using the tool, when you, like we talked about, do it in a group, and there's a lot of people involved in the process of making the decision of what you're doing and what is being reported out of it. And so I think that helps motivate and rally around it as being the correct, I guess, tool to use to go find donors.
And I think we talked about the whole motivating the teams from just a few minutes ago about the results and just the success stories. That's what that's what I always see at the end really motivates the team. It's when that starts happening, and then people realize I can do a better job. I can make more money. More donors come in if I actually look at this stuff and use it. So we are. With more questions, we will get them. We'll follow up after the webinar. I respect time. If you, Sandy, or you, Kristen, have final comments, well, let's have them. Otherwise, we'll thank everybody for their time. So any final comments you'd like to make? Any suggestions for the group out there as they think about what to do with modeling?
I think that my final thought would be, if you screw up the first time, don't give up even if you get some blowback. It is totally worth it to keep doing it over and over again. We had an epic failure the first time, like one of the first projects we did, and we made no money, and we were all scratching our heads, but we didn't stop, and we have only gotten better at it. And the better we get at it, the more we can avoid those epic failures and just have little mistakes here and there. And the more that you do it, the more you have statistics to stand on. We didn't go over a lot of the things like the actual results that we've had, but we have a lot of really, really great figures to kind of prove our point that really looking at the data and using it as often as possible to make decisions has great results. And now I can go to anyone who wants to has some crazy idea or project and say, all right, let's think about this for a minute. Let's look at the data and make sure it's good for you, it's good for me, and that we're actually going to do something positive with it. And so just keep doing it, even if you stumble along the way. It's worth it in the end.
Sandy, that's something we could coin that as Sandy's Law.
Should I say it over and over again?
Yeah. If you screw up, try it again, because you'll get it, and people will buy in and see the value. I mean, that's like really cool.
Wow.
I have actually a final question for you, by the way. So you sound like that's almost like a math or a science law, but you don't. Do you have a math or a science background?
Oh, me? No, I have a degree in history, and I'm certified to teach social studies. And so you definitely don't need a math or a science degree to do any of this. And I think that we do okay.
So, Kristen, anything you'd like to add to this?
I would, reiterate what Sandy said, but also, talk to others that are doing it and use them as a resource, and, ask them what they did, what worked, what they saw, because that was what, was also helpful to me in building our first, model in-house. So utilizing others that have been there, done that. So.
I think that's been one of the themes throughout all of our discussions is do this as a team, collaborate, engage others, vet things. That's where the real value comes from, and then you get buy-in too. Well, good. I want to thank both of you. Awesome conversation, and this has been recorded for those of you listening, and we'll have it up on the website within the week. So I know there's some that couldn't make it; they'll get posted as well. So. Kristen, thank you so much for today, and Sandy as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.